Well, my job here is to convey some thoughts from Tom Robinson, the Dean of the Wharton School. But as I have the opportunity to be here, I have to say a little more. One thing is, of course, remembering Russ for his many contributions to the fields of operations research, and systems thinking, and management science. But it's also fitting on this, that would have been his 91st birthday, honor the remarkable span and enormous energy of his career. He was an active and powerfully influential scholar and teacher for over 60 years, far more than most would only dream of. Personally, in the late 60s, as a young PhD student at MIT, majoring in management science and operations research, Russ was already a giant in the field, and certainly a giant in my field. And I just deeply admired with the innovation, but also the clarity of his writing, the common sense clarity of his innovative thinking. I mean, those are often terms that don't go together with Russ. They certainly did. At that time, just freshly minted, I somehow was invited to speak at a conference on a panel in Washington, D.C. And Russ was on the panel as well. I spoke first and made some typically over-exuberant, freshly minted PhD remarks. And then Russ followed. And I have to say, he was very kind to me, but he certainly straightened out my thinking. And yet I confess I felt no pain at his critique, but rather I felt as if I'd been touched by one of the immortals, as I was. Many years later, I joined Wharton as dean, and Russ was already an emeritus faculty member. But as you all know, retirement for Russ did not mean anything like what it means for many people. He remained actively dedicated as a scholar and a teacher through the years, and now 20 years after arriving at the Wharton School, I spent the early part of last year working actively with Russ as academic director of our advanced management program at the Wharton School and several leadership development programs. Russ was part of my teaching team in all of those, and he just continued to strike deeply the executives who showed up, and always extended and broadened their thinking far beyond what they imagined this program would do for them. And that is what was good for all of us. It's hard to find an area at Wharton today that's not touched in some way by the methods of systems thinking that Russ so championed. His influence knows no limits, and we thank him today, certainly for how he's touched all of our lives, our work, and our hearts with his spirit. And now I'd like to convey Tom Robertson's regrets that he couldn't be here personally, and let you hear his remarks. We gather today to celebrate the remarkable life and work of Russ Ackoff, Penn and Wharton's own father of operations research. He was, of course, a great pioneer in management science, and a major influence in our understanding of the way that businesses and organizations function and change. But in remembering Russ the scholar, the teacher, the mentor, and friend, it is perhaps also helpful to remember the way that he spoke. Quote, "All of our problems arise out of doing the wrong things righter," he once told the Financial Times journalist. The more efficient you are at doing the wrong thing, the wronger you become. It is much better to do the right thing wronger than the wrong thing righter. If you do the wrong thing, if you do the right thing wrong and correct it, you get better. And Russ was fond, as you all know, of tongue twisters like these, in part just for fun, but also because they capture so beautifully the complexity of human systems. He was a problem solver and a systems thinker. He knew that the best way to make our businesses and organizations work better was to always look at the larger system, always cast a larger frame than we thought was necessary. To understand its design and to understand how those component parts interacted. It was then and is now still in many ways a revolutionary theory that has put him on the map for all time. When the news broke of Russ's death, it was met with an incredible outpouring of emotion from the business and research communities, many of whom have shared their responses, as Helen attested, in a special tribute section of the Organization Dynamics website. It's clear from these grateful and heartfelt tributes that Russ has left a long and powerful legacy, as intellectually rigorous as it is humane. He encouraged us always to do the right thing righter. We thank him for that today, as we certainly are all better for it. That concludes Tom Robinson's remarks. Thank you.